She thought the worst was over, that the man she had loved for years, who fed her poisoned meals blended with slugs, stolen pet snails, and swapped heart medication for salt, was finally out of her life. But the mind doesn't heal like a wound, it festers. And after weeks of sleepless nights and shadows that moved when they shouldn't, she found herself in a new apartment, slug-proofed with salt lines, copper tape, and herbal deterrents. But they kept coming, not just slugs, but echoes. Her toothbrush reeking faintly of bleach, though she never cleaned it. A jar under the sink she knows she threw out somehow returned, fuller than before, her vegetarian meals tasting just slightly off. And every time she blinked too long in the bathroom mirror, she could see him, just behind her shoulder, smiling like he never left. And as her body began aching again, ulcers reopening, hair falling out, she finally lifted the lid on her slow cooker, heart hammering, only to find it full of that same mucus-colored stew she used to eat, pulsing slightly, as if alive, and on the condensation-covered lid was a single handwritten note in his handwriting. You still taste best when you're scared. But even after she moved cities, changed her number, and vanished from Reddit, people started noticing something unsettling. A new account had surfaced, posting oddly similar updates, vague references to IBS, slugs, and medication swaps, as if the same voice was speaking through a mask, only this time pretending to be someone else entirely. And the posts weren't just written, they were sharper, colder, almost clinical, as if whoever was behind them wasn't just documenting trauma anymore, but studying it, recreating it in new contexts, like they were experimenting with how much horror they could drip-feed the reader before they'd break away. And one user, a digital forensics hobbyist, decided to dig deeper, cross-referencing timestamps, syntax, IP leakage through shared images, and what he found was stomach-churning. The original partner, the one who'd tortured the girl with slugs and sabotaged her food, had created multiple sock puppet accounts across mental health subreddits, posing as vulnerable women, staging entire fabricated stories of abuse, always ending in some kind of feeding or contamination, always slowly escalating like a pattern or ritual. And in one account, dated only a few weeks ago, there was a photo upload, a blurry image of a kitchen counter, a spoon resting in a bowl of curry, and next to it, unmistakably, a glass jar with something glistening and yellow curled at the bottom. And when people zoomed in and color corrected it, the horror became undeniable. Inside the jar was a single land snail, half dissolved in what looked like vinegar, and written in smudged Sharpie on the jar was one word: Clara. The image spread fast, dissected in horror forums and niche Discord servers, until someone noticed a faint reflection in the jar's glass. A face, partially obscured, but just visible enough to make out the distinct scar above the left brow. The same scar the original poster had described in disturbing detail when recounting her ex's violent outbursts. And suddenly the line between storyteller and subject, victim and predator, began to dissolve, because another user, an archivist of deleted Reddit threads, uncovered that the original account had never been banned or deleted, but had simply gone private, and its last logged post, never seen publicly, bore a different tone entirely: calm, resolved, and chillingly clinical. Control the narrative, and you control the fear, which now seemed less like a cry for help and more like a blueprint. And people began to theorize that everything, the IBS, the slugs, the curry, even the apparent gaslighting, had been pieces of a constructed horror designed to provoke disgust, sympathy, and fascination in equal measure. And yet the physical evidence, the photo, the scar, the reflection, suggested the suffering had been real for someone. But who and why, and whether Clara was a real name or just another part of the fiction, became impossible to untangle, until a final post appeared under a fresh account with no history, titled simply Harvest Log, Batch 9 complete, containing nothing but GPS coordinates to a remote wooded area in Oregon, and a link to a hidden blog detailing the digestive processes of gastropods exposed to human DNA. Curious thrill seekers and amateur investigators couldn't resist the lure of the coordinates, and soon a small group ventured into the dense Oregon woods, live streaming their progress, joking nervously at first until they reached the clearing, where they found a ring of disturbed soil, shallow but deliberate. And as one of them began to dig, the other scanned the area, finding oddities: a rusted scalpel, a weatherproof journal sealed in plastic, and a dozen glass jars half buried in a circle, each filled with thick, translucent fluid and a single pale slug suspended unnaturally still. And when the journal was opened, it contained detailed logs of feeding experiments dated back months, each entry signed with initials CF and referencing test. Subjects by Reddit usernames now long deleted, and suddenly the stream cut out, not with static or signal loss, but with a final, shrill, scraping noise like something dragging across metal, followed by a wet thud and silence, prompting panic online, where the video feed was replayed endlessly by digital sleuths trying to pinpoint the sound, and eventually, an audio engineer isolated a whisper embedded in the last few seconds. Digitally buried beneath the ambient noise, a voice saying, almost regretfully, "They taste best when they think it's fiction." The fallout from the stream's abrupt ending rippled across the internet like wildfire. Reddit threads exploded with theories. TikTok was flooded with dissected clips, and YouTube analysts posted hour-long breakdowns of the final audio, some swearing they could hear a second voice layered behind the whisper, something gurgling or breathing unnaturally close to the mic, while others pointed to frame-by-frame enhancements that revealed a sliver of movement at the tree line. Too fast to be human, too tall to be an animal. And then, 2 days later, one of the streamers reappeared online, dazed and cryptic, posting a single photo to their Instagram story. A close-up of their forearm, now marked with a deep spiral-shaped scar that hadn't been there before, and a caption that simply read, "I thought it was a game," followed by complete silence across all platforms. No responses to DMs, no replies to worried friends. Their phone going straight to voicemail. Meanwhile, the subreddit was locked by moderators claiming a real-world threat, though leaked messages suggested even they were shaken, with one mod admitting privately that they'd received a package in the mail containing a glass jar identical to those from the forest, inside which floated a slug with a tag labeled Control Group B. And suddenly people who had upvoted the original post weeks ago began receiving strange emails. No subject line, no sender address. Just a looping GIF of a forest trail zooming slowly toward darkness, accompanied by an audio file of what sounded like breathing filtered through water. And when some tried to trace the file's metadata, they found coordinates that led not to Oregon, but to dozens of seemingly random locations. Abandoned malls in Michigan, a dried-up lake in Utah, the basement of a condemned asylum in West Virginia. And users who visited these places reported increasingly bizarre phenomena. Dreams of being watched, skin peeling in a spiral pattern, waking up with mud under there, fingernails, and no memory of how it got there. Until finally a whistleblower claiming to be a former military researcher posted an AMA under a throwaway account, stating that what the public had found was the tip of a biological experiment buried since the Cold War, a failed psychic weapon program that had been repurposed by private contractors to create something called the Spiral Threshold, a project meant to weaponize belief itself by planting viral folklore into the collective, subconscious until it took root as real phenomena, reality sculpted by shared imagination, backed by biotechnological triggers hidden in seemingly innocent media. And the more people interacted with the story, the stronger the phenomenon became, until now, it had begun to manifest autonomously. Asterisk, we build a story we can't unwrite. Asterisk, the whistleblower wrote, before deleting their account and disappearing from the internet completely. Within hours of the whistleblower's disappearance, internet forums that had once been the heart of the discussion began to glitch. Threads wouldn't load, timestamps looped back on themselves, and users reported their keyboards typing by themselves, always in spirals of characters that seemed meaningless until someone overlaid them on a satellite map, revealing the pattern was forming across real-world terrain like some massive, slow unfolding sigil. Meanwhile, several independent investigators who had visited the earlier coordinates vanished, their last uploads showing footage with warped colors and warped voices, saying things like asterisk, "It's not the forest that's haunted. It's the idea of it asterisk. One video even captured a reflection in a stream where the camera person's face wasn't their own, but something vaguely familiar and terribly wrong, like a deep fake generated from a childhood nightmare. And then came the glitch in the cloud. Major storage providers reported a mysterious recursive file that couldn't be deleted, copied, or scanned, labeled spiral.exe, which would auto-play when opened, displaying a black screen with only one sentence. Asterisk, you've already heard. The call. Asterisk. From there, things escalated fast. VPN companies started sending out breach alerts, not due to hackers, but because user logs showed impossible IPs originating from deep ocean trenches and uninhabited coordinates in the Arctic. News broke that multiple radio telescopes had picked up synchronized low-frequency transmissions matching the breathing loop from the original stream, but originating from entirely different hemispheres at once, as if the signal had found a way to bypass physics itself, anchored in something older than language. Then urban legends, long forgotten, started reappearing with disturbing consistency. Children around the world drawing the same spiral patterns, mumbling about the voice behind the trees, while teachers and parents chalked it up to TikTok trends, even as some of them began to experience spontaneous nosebleeds and memory gaps. Military satellites tracking thermal anomalies in North America went offline one by one, with their last feeds showing vast, circular patches of woodland glowing faintly, as if irradiated, and just as quickly, all evidence was scrubbed from official archives. Then came the dreams. People all over the world began reporting identical nightmares. A forest under a black sky with no stars, and something enormous breathing just beyond the trees, something that moved in loops and never broke eye contact even when unseen. And those who described the dream in detail would, within days, begin speaking a language no one could recognize, but which others who had dreamt it would immediately understand. Asterisk, the spiral doesn't speak. It remembers. Asterisk, and somewhere deep in a repurposed research facility, long since abandoned by its original architects, a red light began blinking in a forgotten monitoring chamber, where biological samples in thick glass jars twitched in unison, as if stirred by something waking up, not from sleep, but from silence. At first, no one noticed the red light blinking beneath the mountain because by then, attention had shifted elsewhere, toward the cities where patterns in electricity grids began echoing the spiral. Whole power maps curving subtly across states and nations. Engineers baffled by systems that seemed to redesign themselves in the middle of the night, without human input or central commands. Then the birds began flying in circles above major capitals, ignoring migratory paths, refusing to land, their feathers falling in slow spirals that dissolved before hitting the ground, while the red light pulsed, brighter each day, activating dormant systems that had not been touched since the Cold War old. Machines built to monitor seismic activity, now repurposing themselves to track something deeper, not under the Earth but within it, as if the planet itself had been seeded with code, waiting to be unlocked by collective attention. The dreams became waking visions, people seeing the spiral etched into puddles, static, even the wrinkles of their own skin, some clotted into walls or their own bodies, unable to sleep until they had recreated the curve perfectly, whispering that the center is. Coming on forums and darknet message boards, a new term began to appear. Arrow Protocol, an alleged emergency measure developed decades ago by a classified think tank for responding to mimetic threats. Phenomena so virulent they spread not through biology or technology, but awareness, things that grew stronger just by being known. The file associated with the Arrow Protocol was impossible to download in full, always fragmenting into distorted images and corrupted audio clips, but a few frames. Leaked diagrams of a human brain overlaid with ancient crop circle patterns, and a single line of text in Latin. Asterisk non est somnium, said Vocatio. This is not a dream, but a summons. Meanwhile, reports came in from deep-sea drilling rigs claiming they heard breathing. Not asterisk mechanical groaning, not seismic pressure, but breathing steady and slow, echoing up through miles of rock and water. And in every case, their communications equipment went dark immediately after, when finally someone managed to access the server farm beneath the mountain, the one where the red light had first begun blinking. They found that it was no longer running any known software, instead displaying a single, ever-changing spiral and a timer counting backward. Not in Earth time, but in what experts believed were astronomical units. Measuring not time, but distance, something was approaching, not from space, but from inside the folds of reality itself. An arrival calculated not by speed, but by how many people knew about it. And with each post, each whisper, each thought, it came closer. Somewhere in the desert, a lone radio technician recorded a final transmission before vanishing, his last words garbled except for one chilling phrase repeated 3 times. Asterisk. It's under us now. It's under us now. It's listening through the roots. Asterisk, and then the timer reached 0, not with a sound, but with a stillness so complete that clocks stopped ticking, hearts missed a beat, and every screen across the world blinked once. Then went dark except for those displaying the spiral, which began to rotate in reverse, unwinding itself as if time itself were unraveling. And in that moment, people felt it not as fear, but as memory, like waking from a lifetime of amnesia and realizing they had always known this was coming, that the spiral was not just a signal, but a map, a shape encoded into the structure of thought and time. And the thing it led to was not an entity in the traditional sense, but a return, a rejoining, as if reality had been broken off from something older and deeper long ago. And now that fracture was healing. And as the ground opened in impossible ways, as cities shimmered and blurred like mirages folding inward, as the stars above aligned in curves no telescope had ever noticed, the final understanding arrived. Not spoken, not written, but felt universally and instantaneously, that the spiral was not coming for us, it was coming through us, that each human mind had been a chamber echoing part of its shape, and now those echoes were aligning, resonating, completing the pattern, and in that perfect harmony there was no terror, only silence and light, and an endless turning inward into something too vast for any language to describe, until the spiral stopped, and there was nothing.